Of your emotions can make the confidence ring. Yet in all your might and glory, vanished from the skies. Even just another story, misleading man-made lies. They tell of how you fell from the sky.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And my guest today is Roy Warden. He's from Tucson, here in Tucson with me. And before I bring him up here, I want to share one of his columns. Roy publishes something called Arizona Common Sense, an exercise in aggressive, nonpartisan political activist. How are you doing, Roy?
I'm doing fine, Mr. Thompson. How are you?
It's Douglas, Clay Douglas, but
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Sometimes I don't know who I am, you know.
I'm very sorry.
Well, I brought you on to talk about the Occupy Tucson movement, and you say that the members of this Occupy Tucson movement are about to embark upon a great adventure, which is no less than the continuation of the American Revolution, first declared in 1776 and later reaffirmed in the 50s and the 60s by the civil rights movements. Your forefathers. Now, some people would kind of go strange, because I know they're going to be calling you a racist like they called me a racist. And, you know, my real opinion is that I don't care what color you are, I don't care what religion you are, the Constitution protects you on that. You know, I do care about an illegal situation. I do care about law, and you point out that our forefathers fought with muskets and cannon so that you may now fight with words and civil actions, but in the end the goal is the same: the transformation of America's society so that justice will prevail and government of, by, and for the people may not perish from earth. Conduct yourselves with dignity. Steep yourself in the wisdom gained by the civil rights movement. Now, they're going to be calling you racist, but you're comparing this movement with the civil rights movement. And in my opinion, all of us, the blacks, the Indians, the whites, we should all be joining arms, linking it against these banksters. And so let's. What's your opinion on this, Roy? What's Occupy Tucson? What do they want to accomplish? What are we fighting for here?
First of all, I'm not sure. Their motivations will be revealed over a period of time. Nobody's quite sure what these folks are all about on a national level or on the local level here in Tucson. For example, they could be simply a left-wing version of the Tea Party, and the Tea Party generally represents the right-wing interests of the Republican Party. So it could be that the Occupy Tucson people are merely the left-wing version of the Tea Party, and all they're interested in is left-wing politics, which would also include the banking crisis and the banksters ripping off America and all of that. Now, my advice to them, and I've tried to communicate with them with some level of success, is that if you stay focused on the singular issue of rich versus poor, and you might even say the argument starts with Pharaoh and the Jews in Egypt back 2,000 years ago and more, if you start with that and only focus on the rich ripping off the poor and the banksters and the stock manipulators and the mortgage bankers and all of that taking down the American economy, then you're going to literally find that 80 or 90% of America, or even more, 99% as you say, will support you. However, if you keep going down or digress into other traditional left-wing areas, such as open border policy, gay rights, anti-war, all of that, not that these, are not causes that you may be interested in, but if you incorporate that into your general platform, then you will be trying to speak to everyone on everything, which means you'll be saying nothing to anybody. So you got to stay focused on what's important here and not become involved in what I call partisan activism.
Okay, I'm not sure. following you here. You know, I think in the '60s we had the music, we had the marijuana, and we stopped a war. We stopped a war that was, again, that was illegal, that was unjustified. There was no Gulf of Tonkin incident anymore, and there was a 9/11 attack by Arabs. And but we've got so many different issues to cover. It would seem like we would want to touch up on a lot of these. The wars that are costing us billions of dollars, the illegals that are costing us billions of dollars, and the bankers that are making all the money off the drugs and all the world war and everything else, and enslaving the American people. We've got a lot of issues to deal with here.
Well, I can address that very clearly, especially with regards to the illegals. And let me re-emphasize something you said earlier. My issue is not on race or nationality. It's based on sovereignty and citizenship. And that would include, for example, if a Mexican citizen or a citizen from any part of the world comes into America with a lawful visa or a green card, then the minute he steps off the boat or steps off the plane, he is entitled to the full bounty of America, insofar as he does not overstay his visa, with I think the only exception is welfare and voting. But everything else is on the table and is there for that person to enjoy because he has lawfully entered the country. If, however, he has unlawfully entered the country, then he should be denied all of those things and eventually, when apprehended, sent home. Now, how this all ties together is when you look at the mortgage meltdown and the financial meltdown in Wall Street and the people being forced out of their homes and foreclosures and all of that, it does tend to the underlining premise, and that is connected with open border policy and the use of illegal labor to construct residential housing here in Arizona and in other states.
Hey, Roy, I've said, first of all, the banksters are behind all the wars. They fund both sides. It's part of their platform, and they don't care. They don't care how many people die off of it. You know, kind of a great racket. You know, they take your tax money to build the bombs to blow up places, and then they pay Halliburton to go back and rebuild it with their cut in it. But this illegal situation, they are using the illegals to run the drugs up here, and the sheriffs now are being threatened. I'm putting together an event in Cochise County to benefit the sheriff and to get the sheriff some support here. We've got sheriffs all over the country, like Sheriff Richard Mack. He's putting together an organization of sheriffs to defend the Constitution, and the federal government is suing our sheriffs here to prevent them from enforcing a federal law. That's got to be insanity. But
well, here's what the issue is. There's so many complications here, and I'm getting a lot of feedback on the phone. I don't know if that is anything you can work with.
It's probably nothing I can. It's probably nothing I can. Let me hang up and call you right back.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see if that works.
Yes, good morning.
Yeah, all right, let's try that one.
Okay.
Is that any better?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Now, here's a central point I need to make, and frankly, I lose a lot of people here. And essentially what it is partisanship, left-wing theology and right-wing theology. And America is very neatly divided between right-wing and left-wing, and people tend to think in terms of whatever ideology it is that they're following. The right-wing people tend to think according to right-wing theology. The left-wing people tend to think about left-wing theology. And my point is, when it comes to the mortgage meltdown and the bankers ripping us off, and all of the great economic collapse that's happened as a consequence of the financial collapse in 2008, and it is very, very profound and it's affected nearly everybody. when it comes to that singular issue, then I believe the vast majority of right-wing and left-wing people have a vested common self-interest in stopping that. Just like, for example, globalization, with the American markets being open to all the cheap goods made in foreign countries, and even American companies going over and investing money there and bringing back goods here and selling them cheaply and driving American workers out of employment. These are economic issues which I think would rightly concern all Americans, independent of their political ideology, and I believe they could unite 80 or 90% of Americans could see the self-interest in protecting American jobs, protecting the American economy, stopping the rich from ripping off the poor. And that's why on my newsletter I call it aggressive and confrontational but non-partisan. It's not from the left, it's not from the right, it's a common interest that all people should share, all Americans should share.
I referred to the Republican and the Democratic Party as two wings on the same bird, and the same thing with liberal and conservative. Divide and conquer. If we can divide a people on the account of abortion or even religion, that's what they like to do. They like to keep the religions fighting with each other. That's why Albert Pike was able to predict Third World War being with the Muslims. But
well, yeah, you're correct on that. But let me go one step further. Not only is it good from the interest of the bankers to divide and conquer America, it's good for certain aspects of business because lots of money is made in marketing left-wing theology to the left wing and right-wing theology to the right wing. For example, the right-wing people, I think, are far more successful at it with the Rush Limbaughs, the Sean Hannitys, the Laura Ingrams, and all of that. They market books, they market themselves, they go around and speak, and they're only interested, of course, in speaking to the choir or the people that follow the same viewpoints that they have. And so lots and lots of money is made in marketing these ideas, but it moves away from the common interest of most Americans.
How do you feel about the whole pharmaceutical industry and the drug industry? I mean, they've made, the conservatives want to put people in jail for what they carrying around their pocket, what they're smoking, what they're putting up their nose, whatever. They want to put people, and we've got more people in prison right now than they had in the Soviet Union during the gulags and that Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote so well about. What about that?
I agree with you.
We got to stop the drug. We got to stop the drugs. Well, why not just let people do whatever they want? Well, it's like they stole our #1 cash crop by turning it into a drug. They tried to turn apricot seeds into a drug so they could so you wouldn't cure yourself of cancer. I mean, this is all put on us by the media, which is pretty well controlled by the people who want to make the money off of it. We got more people. They're drugging Americans the same way they drugged the Chinese during the Boxer Rebellion. They pumped heroin and opium into China. They're pumping us full of 200,000% marked up drugs too. What about that? How do you feel? How do we deal with that?
Let me be very clear on this, because now we're digressing into other areas. Now, I think you're exactly right in what you say, but here's what the problem is. Until you can get Americans to move away from a partisan viewpoint on one side or the other, they're not going to see the common ground they have with other Americans on these issues. For example, I think the vast majority of Americans would agree the pharmaceutical companies shouldn't get away with what they're doing. They shouldn't legislate the things that they legislate and all of that. But here's what my point is. If we move back to the central issue of the economic inequality created by the banker class and the rich stock manipulators and so forth, if we stay on that ground and build consensus on that, once Americans understand between the left and the right, hey, we have a common interest that's independent of the leadership of the particular wings that we belong to. We have to look to our common interest and not to the leadership of the wings of our respective parties for direction. Once Americans start to find the common ground they have in being ripped off by the bankers, they're going to look to the other issues and see where they have common ground as well. And that's what my point is. We can't start this discussion on the issue of the Occupy Tucson movement, the protests against the bankers ripping off the economy, and move on to drugs and everything else, because then it becomes a general analysis, a general tirade, and it doesn't focus people back on what the central issue should be, the common ground that we all have with regards to being ripped off by the upper class.
I think you probably got a real good point there. It's almost, that's kind of the way I felt about it most of my life. I've always been independent, and I guess one of the ways that they've tried to demonize me is calling me a lone wolf. I think that means individuals. If we stand up for the rights and security of individuals, and we've all got the same right and the same security to be able to speak our minds. The security is outlined in the Bill of Rights. I think our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, is one of the greatest achievements in time. But they've stepped on it, right?
Well,
taking it over.
Stepped on it, but let me also be clear on an issue. And again, right now I'm standing all by myself with a particular program that I myself have been involved in. You see, I think we have more freedoms now than we ever had in the so-called good old days. The difference is we've forgotten how to aggressively use them, and we've forgotten how to aggressively protect our rights in the courts. And I have been able to do that. I've been able to protect my rights in the courts and to aggressively move ahead with things that I need to do in the courts. And I don't complain anymore about the general corruption of government, at least here in Tucson. I'm actually involved in a court process to change that. It actually is going to have a material change in that. And that's because I've engaged in First Amendment activity, which then the mayor and the council stopped by an arrest, which gives me the power, because of that arrest, to go into court and bring these issues before a judge. This is what was meant by a redress of grievances. It was meant a court action and also the right to confront your elected officials and give your complaints to them. So the point I'm getting at is we have tremendous rights if you know how to exercise them. And here in Tucson, they've done everything they can for the past 6 years to stop me in the free exercise of my rights. And by so doing, they've given me the access to the federal courts in which I may deal with issues such as open border policy, which is the intentional invitation, aiding and abetting, enticing and inviting, and otherwise encouraging Mexican illegals to cross the border so they can work at low-paying, actually formerly high-paying jobs in the construction industry for less than minimum wage. So I've gotten standing to litigate these issues in court because they violated my right to speak out against them.
Yeah, let me share a story out of the Arizona Daily Star, talking about Mayor Walkup, who said he wanted to keep speakers from repeating the same things at every meeting, but even the mainstream says that should be viewed with extreme restraint. Walkup went too far. In the September 13th meeting, he shut down Roy Warden as soon as Warden mentioned the name of Richard Miranda, who is the interim city manager. Warden kept speaking, and Walkup ordered police to remove him. Warden has gained notoriety with his extreme anti-illegal immigrant stands, which he conveys in often offensive and outright nasty slurs. His comments are often incendiary and pointed at specific people, Miranda in particular. But the Star does say we must be clear. The Star does not support Warden or his statements. In fact, he's been barred from leaving online comments on our stories because he accepted it, but then violated the StarNet terms of participation with his vile attacks. There is a difference, however. Walkup is a public official running a public meeting where government decisions are being made, while the Star is a private company free to edit its content and decide what to publish.
Yeah, but let me make something clear here. Even people here in Tucson, they've accepted at face value that Warden has made vile and disgusting comments regarding different ethnic groups and so forth. Nothing could be further from the truth. They never have given me an interview, which they published. They've given me 3 different interviews since 2006, none of which were published. And one of the huge problems that the Arizona Star has is that they're owned by right-wing commercial interests, but they have a left-wing political viewpoint. And very early in this immigration issue, I pointed out, I said, you know, you in the left-wing media, you bear a heavy responsibility for all of the Mexican citizens who have died in the deserts coming here, because you have basically rolled out the welcome mat and made it sound like anyone from Mexico that wants to come to America should come, and you'll have jobs and protections and so forth and so on. You and the media have encouraged this ingress of people because it follows a left-wing viewpoint that you have, that we want to divide America on the basis of race and ethnicity. And that's what you folks have done, and frankly, you've done a great disservice to the Mexican people themselves, the poor people that you say that you're championing. You're actually destroying them. They've actually been destroyed coming here. They've been destroyed by some of the aspects of NAFTA, where the farmers can no longer produce corn and compete with American subsidized corn. And so a guy loses his 40-acre farm in which his family had for generations. They were prosperous people in the village they lived. The kids went to school. They had money. They had opportunities. And now they've lost all of that because of NAFTA. They've come across the border, and now you have that same guy working at Taco Bell selling corn tortillas, pots from the same corn that he used to manufacture down in Mexico, and it's a shame to him. It's not an opportunity for him. It's a shame that he has been reduced to that because of the economic policies of America and Mexico, and you and the media are responsible for the horror that these people have had to endure. Now, they hate that. They absolutely hate themselves when they have to look in the mirror and say, hey, Warden's making us accountable. I've never said anything against the Mexican people or the poor immigrants other than to say they're victims in this too. They're victims of their own national policy, of the Mexican government, which is basically to take, if you look at it this way, an unwanted commodity, and that means an excess of people in Mexico that cannot be taxed because they don't have any employment. They're poor, and they might even require social services, and so they're a net drain on the economy. Now, if you can kick them out of Mexico where they're worth nothing from an economic standpoint, and shove them up into America where they can get jobs even at Taco Bell and other places, they will send home remittances to their families. Now, in 2006, which was the last time I got, they come out every 4 years with these economic projections and so forth. In 2006, the Mexican economy earned $25 billion, that was with a B, dollars from remittances sent home from America, and that was only $500 million less than what they earned from the production and sale of oil. And so you see, it's almost a stroke of genius where they take unwanted commodity, i.e. extra population, which they can't sustain, and they shove it up into America, and now that sends home $25 billion a year.
Well,
that's specific Mexican economic policy.
And what these illegals are costing us here, according to FAIR, is $1.3 billion per year for education, medical care, and incarceration.
Okay, now let me respond to that, because you're exactly right. However, in the educational, the medical, and the incarceration, these also are industries here in America that employ people, and the people who are employed in those 3 areas, so schooling and incarceration, are employed because these illegals are here. And so you have an American component where American citizens have a vested interest in the continuation of this because that's how they got their jobs. You see, even the negative effects that we look at, the cost of incarceration, the cost of extra education, and all of that, is a positive sense from the vested interest of American political and economic interests. that want the employment that comes as a consequence. Let me give you a great example of that. We would all think that the cost of crime is a terrible thing. The cost of extra crime in the police and the suffering that citizens get because they're a victim of crime is something we should eradicate. However, I've been informed by many attorneys here in Tucson, they say, Roy, we need the extra crime that comes as a consequence of illegals being in this country. We need the extra crime they commit here in Tucson, because if we didn't have that to process as lawyers, to prosecute and defend, then half of the lawyers in town would be out of work in 6 months. You see, we need the economic activity that comes as a consequence of this crime. Now, once you start to understand that each of these, what we as normal people would consider to be an unwelcome problem, i.e. high crime rates and high costs of crime and so forth, is actually a benefit to certain American citizens that get their employment there, and they don't want to see it stop.
You're right. It's a prison industry. The judges make extra money for everybody that they put into prisons. I mean, we even had judges that were putting kids in prison up in back east and up north.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right on. This is a prison industry. They want the crime because it's a Hegelian dialectic at the best. The aliens come up here looking for work. They take all the low-paying jobs, put Americans out of work, and they're making money off it. The lawyers and the prison system, they brag about it. Arizona even bragged about it. We make more than license plates. They are hiring out the prisoners for 25 cents an hour. They're paying the prisoners 25 cents an hour to do jobs that used to be held by Americans in factories like Intel and Intuit.
Okay. Now, you're exactly right, and let me give you one further angle on that. These illegals aren't taking the jobs. The employers are saying,